In today's video, I'm merely going to share with you 3 cautions. No big deal really. Just as a fee-only financial advisor for over 20 years, these are the 3 cautions that I have found help people achieve their long-term goals and avoid making the most costly mistakes. So let's jump in. For the first one, it's avoid rules of thumb when it comes to making important decisions. Now, rules of thumb like you should be 60-40 when you're retired in your asset allocation, 4% withdrawal rate, things like that, rules of thumb. Those are great when you're looking directionally, in 20 years, in 10 years, in 5 years, where do I want to be? But when it comes to actually planning and to making that leap and actually making the decisions, what's right for you, what's right for your family, and what should you do, those rules of thumb can steer you in the wrong direction. Let me give you an example. Asset allocation. There's a rule of thumb that says, take 100 less your age, and that should be what your asset allocation is. And you know what? That might work for some people, but it's not going to work for everybody. It really comes down to, how are you going to feel when the stock market is scary? When the stock market is down 20, 30, 40%? And are you going to be able to stay the course? And I wish there was one rule that worked for everybody of the same age group, but that's not how it works. It really has to do with how you've reacted in the past, how difficult things are, whether or not you've blown out of the market, whether you've sold stocks at the low in the past to kind of stop the pain. One of the biggest predictors of how you're going to do in the next stock market correction, the next big painful downturn, one of the big items that predicts what you're going to do is what you did last time. But you can't always count on that. If the last time there was a stock market correction, you were making good money, the reality is you're going to feel differently about risk once you quit working, once that nest egg is all you have and you have to guard that nest egg. So just because you didn't blow out last time doesn't mean you're not going to blow out next time. And it certainly doesn't mean you can stay at 80% exposed to the stock market or 100%. Now it's your decision, right? But you hire professionals to give you good advice. And I don't know your situation. So this is not financial advice for you, but that's a rule of thumb that can be extremely costly for you, particularly if you're over allocated to stocks. You've always been 80%. You've never blown out before. Boy, that can be a real costly mistake. The first time this is your nest egg and you're no longer working and it feels different and all of a sudden you can't sleep at night and the stock market stays down for months or even years at a time. That's not when you want to be thinking, gee, is this rule of thumb right for me? So avoid rules of thumb, number 1. Number 2, take on no more complexity than what you need to achieve your goals. And where I see this coming in is when people invest in complicated investments, partly because, they're smart enough to understand how it works. You see this with stock options. You see this with various contracts that insurance companies or wirehouses will have where, they'll give you 80% of the upside of the S&P 500, but only 20% of the downside, things like that. There's no free lunch. If only it were that simple, right? There's all this hidden information inside of the 100-page prospectus of 8-point font that they give you. And so just because it sounds good doesn't mean it's a good investment. If you don't understand what you're invested in, the time that you're going to be worried about that the most is when you need to have the most fortitude. So avoid complex investments and avoid illiquid investments. The world changes quickly, and when the world changes, you want to be able to change with it and hopefully change before that impact is in whatever investment that you might have. So an example, a hedge fund, maybe, a hedge fund has done pretty well. and some sophisticated salesperson that says that they're a financial advisor will say, this investment is not correlated with the stock market. Look, when the market is up, this is down, and when the stock market's down, this does well. Or what's called an absolute return fund. It does well in good times and bad times. But you know what happens? There's something called correlation breakdown, where instead of moving in opposite directions, when you need that diversification the most, everything moves down. And then some of the nice features that are in these quote unquote sophisticated tools, like there might be a gate that allows you to sell 20, 30, 40, 50% of your holdings. Well, if you want to sell, guess what? Everybody else wants to sell as well. And oftentimes that door, that gate gets locked and you cannot get out of these investments. So be super careful with investments that you really don't understand, because, and I'm not saying you can't understand them, you can, but it takes a lot of time. And again, they're designed to be sold. These investments are designed to be sold, not to be purchased. Very few people are ever going out and saying, I want an absolute return hedge fund. I want a zero beta hedge fund. I want something that moves opposite direction of the stock market. There's very few of us in the retail world that are looking for that. But it doesn't mean you're not going to be pitched it. And if you're being pitched it, what it probably means is there's a high commission that somebody's earning. So I encourage you to be extra, extra careful. Okay, the third one's pretty basic, but you know what? This is something that can derail your investment success if you're not careful. And that is, while saving money tends to be one of the hardest things to do, right? To spend less than what you earn, to fight the temptation of lifestyle creep. I've mentioned before, over half of Americans that make over $100,000 a year don't save a dime. So saving money can be hard. It's often the hardest part, but it's necessary, but insufficient. You need to do more than just save. You also need to invest. You need to beat the rate of inflation so your money can start, the earnings on your money can start growing as well. So the earnings on your earnings can keep growing and compounding. So you want to be beating inflation, and every year it gets a little bit easier to save even more money. And eventually your money is working harder for you than you are. Your money can grow on average at a rate faster than you can put money in. And that's what we're all hoping to achieve. So that's number 3, but stick with me. I've got 2 bonuses I want you to know. The next one is using rules of thumb, let's say the 4% rule, for how much money that you can take out of your account. Oftentimes what happens with rules of thumb like that is you end up unnecessarily sacrificing. You could have spent more, but you just didn't know. And the difference between spending $50,000 a year and $75,000 a year is a lot. And it can bring a lot of new adventures and experiences for you. And if you're married or you have a life partner, it can bring a lot of experiences for you and your partner and your family that you might be unnecessarily sacrificing. So a rule of thumb is great as you're looking at things. I'm 5 years away. Am I getting close to being able to retire? But a rule of thumb can be extremely painful, because when most people realize they could have been spending more is later, after their go-go years are gone. Their go-go years have come and gone. And I don't want to see that happen to you. Okay. And then the next one that I really want to share with you, and this is super important, is the way that risk feels to you today when you're working likely will be very different than how risk feels to you once you're no longer working. And having somebody that understands that and can help guide you towards getting that right asset allocation. That is going to determine 80% of your investment success, at least, is your asset allocation. And the one thing that can really hurt you after you've already won, you have enough to retire. The one thing that can really hurt you is blowing out of your long-term stock allocation at exactly the wrong time. That I see a lot of people get hurt from that, and I don't want that to happen to you. And one way to avoid that is to have a better sense of where you are. And that's why I want you to think about watching this video here, which are the 3 signs that you're richer than what you think you are. I'll see you in there. Thanks for joining me in this video. Bye-bye.